صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Inshallah, we'll continue with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Please welcome Mahdi with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بتقواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على
Please welcome Sister Kiswa with another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum everybody. My name is Kissa. Today I'll be reciting Surah Inna Anzalna Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna Anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr. Ma adraka ma Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadr. Ma adraka ma Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadr khayrun min alfi shahr. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام فيها حتى مطلع الفجر.
So before we proceed with the program, just a reminder, since there's some new faces today, so please make sure that you check in at the front and make sure that we have that ability to do contact tracing. There is a children's program going on at the same time for kids 9 and under, so please make sure that your kids are either next to you in the program or they're in the children's program. And as you can see, there is another group that's renting that space right next to ours, so the lobby is a shared area. So inshallah, let's try to be the best representation of Islam and be good neighbors to them. Please make sure that kids are not being disruptive or running around in the lobby area during the program and also afterward. At this point, without any further ado, I'd like to request our guest speaker, Sheikh Raza, to please begin the lecture. Please welcome him with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
For your own community of all community members, please recite the Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله. يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز معكم فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الناس قد جاءكم الرسول بالحق من ربكم فآمنوا خيرا لكم وإن تكفروا فإن لله ما في السماوات والأرض وكان الله عليما حكيما. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesterday we began speaking about this first sentence of Al-Khutbatul Al-Qasi'ah from the Nahj al-Balagha, the 192nd khutbah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Imam Ali, in the Nahj al-Balagha. Sallu ala Muhammad. Where the Imam says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi labisa al-izza wal-kibriya wa akhtarahuma li nafsihi duna khalqih. The Imam says, praise be unto Allah, unto God, who has donned honor and dignity, izz and kibriya, and he has chosen these two characteristics for himself as opposed to anyone else. No one else has a right, nor the ability to have these two characteristics for them. And we began talking about this in terms of that original message of the Prophet, which was and which revolved around this notion and this concept of haqq. He said that haqq, on one level, talks about what is right and what is true. But on a deeper level, it talks about being and existence, reality. We said that if a person wants to truly be good, truly be virtuous and just, call for justice in society and goodness and compassion in society, then he must also look at existence and the way that God has created this world. Before getting into the details about this connection between goodness, truth, and existence, I'd like to just take a moment to talk about these first few words. When you're looking at Nahj al-Balagha, the very name Nahj al-Balagha talks about eloquence and beauty of words. Nahj al-Balagha, one translation is the path of eloquence. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Path of eloquence. Eloquence talks about beauty of words and how words are put together. And so if we want to truly appreciate the words of Imam Ali, we can't just talk about the concepts separate from the way that Imam expresses these concepts. And the Imam uses particular metaphors and images to express these concepts for us. And the way he puts these images together have become themselves one of the pinnacles of Islamic history and Islamic culture. One of the highest levels of Islamic art is this very natural balagha. When we think about, for example, sometimes people will question what is the origin and the source of natural balagha. In fact, when we talk about the origin and where do all of these khutab, or do all of these proclamations and speeches of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, come from, we see that even before the compiler of Nahj al-Balagha, Sharif al-Radi, even before he came and during his own time, the words and the speech of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, had become a symbol and a sign of the ultimate level of a human being's ability to speak and have eloquence. This is something that was particularly important during that time, but it's something that we can appreciate too. Beauty and art touches us at one of the most deepest levels as human beings. When we look at a beautiful artwork or a beautiful portrait, there's something that moves us in a very deep sense. And so when we are trying to understand the words of Imam Ali, we have to also have an appreciation for this. The khutab, the speeches of Imam Ali, for those who maybe have a question in their mind about what are the source for these speeches, it had become almost what we call today a genre. People had collected multiple books. On one count, at least 8 or 9 books of the khutab and the speeches of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, before and during the time of the compilation of Nahj al-Balagha. Some of these compilations were even during the time of our, for example, 6th Imam, our earlier Imams. And so there's no real question. If we're trying to think about the origin of Nahj al-Balagha and the authenticity of Nahj al-Balagha, there's no real question that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, presented these khutab. And at the same time, these were spread amongst Muslims as the pinnacle of what a human being can say and how he can say it. Now, this isn't just something that we can take pride in as followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt. Yes, we are followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt, and we should try to resemble our Ahlul Bayt as our role models. Right? But what we try to look at and we try to understand is how do these words have meaning for us? We are trying to go back to that ultimate message of the Prophet, trying to understand haqq and truth. And we are ultimately beholden to that truth. So let's look at the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi labisa al-izza wal-kibriya. Praise be to God who has donned these 2 characteristics, izz and kibriya. What does it mean for us to don something, to wear something? The commentators say that when somebody wears something, when we wear, say, a shirt or whatever else, it adheres to us, it sticks to us. And not only that, we are identified with that clothing, right? So such that if, say, for example, somebody wants to point someone out to me, they'll say, look at that person who's wearing the black shirt. or that person who's wearing the gray shirt. Right? So clothing has not only a very great proximity to our beings, but also it's the way that we identify other people. We identify other things. And so when Allah says, and Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali says about Allah, Alhamdulillahi alladhi labisa al-izza wal-kibriya, he's saying that Allah is identified with these two characteristics by his very essence, by his very existence. They are one and the same with Allah. Allah is the one who has izz and kibriya, and they are not separate from him. Kibriya comes from a word kibr. I don't want to get into too many of the details, but these are important to understand the ultimate message that Amir al-Mu'mineen is trying to convey. Comes from kibr. Kibr ultimately also goes back to idea of greatness, of something that is majestic and large and great. The root of arrogance and the root of pride is when we look at ourselves and when we think about ourselves as being some great being that exists in the world, something that has particular characteristics. Maybe I think I'm particularly smart, or I'm particularly wise, or I'm say good at a certain trait or a certain skill. And so I think of myself as having this characteristic that is maybe better than others. And so this creates an arrogance in me. I look at myself, I admire a characteristic, and I think, well, I have something special. Izz, on the other hand, is about power, about might. So izz sometimes is also translated in terms of dignity. When we think about someone who is powerful, someone who's mighty, we think, well, this person, if, for example, they want to do something in the world, or they want to force me to do something, if that person is powerful, then I must respect their wishes. I must dignify their wishes by acting upon them. And so izz and kibriya ultimately go back to certain characteristics that we find to be particularly good about whether it is ourselves or about someone else. Now, when we think about, well, why is God al-Mutakabbir and al-Aziz? God has this characteristic of greatness and honor and dignity. Well, it kind of is pretty clear. Allah, and we're taking this for a given, we don't want to get into all of the theology. Allah is the ultimate creator of all the worlds. Allah is not only the creator, but also the sustainer. He gives all the heavens and the earth, not only that initial creation, but he also sustains them through all of his blessings. Whatever life we have originated from Allah, who had created, for example, our parents and our parents' parents, and so on and so forth. Allah is the ultimate creator and the sustainer of this world through all of the blessings that he gives us. And so, on one level, it makes sense why Allah is the one who is great and honored. That's one level of this equation. What is our ultimate relationship? The question is, what's our relationship with God? What's our need of God? Sometimes this is explained in terms of this idea, an initial creation and then a sustaining. So for example, some people will give the analogy of maybe someone who creates a building or who builds some structure. So for example, take this hotel. What is it that requires for this hotel to exist? There's certain architectures who have to come in. There's certain architects who have to come in. Maybe certain engineers, certain builders, some construction workers, and so on and so forth. They will build this building. They'll put it all together, and then they all go their separate ways. And then maybe you'll need someone to come and manage the building. Certain, maybe for example, repairs, or they need to come and turn on the lights and so on and so forth. There are certain things that they must do to manage the building and make the building continue to survive. And then maybe one day this building will run out of its use, and then someone will come and destroy it. And so sometimes we think our relationship with God is in these terms. But in fact, and if we try to get to the very essence of our need and dependence on God, this is a really bad analogy. A better analogy that some scholars give is one that we can, inshallah, use and exercise to understand. And maybe we can do that after a loud salawat. Ultimately, we're trying to understand this ayah of the Quran, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. What does it mean for us to be for God and from Him? So the exercise is this, and you can try this at home, or you can try this right now. It goes something like this. So you can imagine in your mind some object. It can be whatever object you want. It could be a pen, it could be a paper, whatever it is. And you have this image in your mind, this object in your mind, and then imagine that it is large and then it is small. Imagine, for example, it's white, the pen or the paper is white, and then all of a sudden imagine that it's black. And then imagine that this object, this pen in your mind, is not a pen anymore, and maybe it's something else. It's a table. And then imagine again that this table is small, and then imagine that it's big, and then imagine that it's no more. Imagine something else, maybe a horse or something else, a bottle. Now, what is the relationship of that object in our mind with that object? What is our relationship with that object? As soon as we decided to create that thing, it came into being. And as soon as we decided to change it, it changed. And as soon as we decided to destroy it and to erase it from our minds, it went away. But if at any moment during the existence of that object in our mind, we decided to turn our attention towards something else, what happens to the object? It disappears. In its very essence and its very existence, that object that we have created in our mind is in total and utter need. Not only just for us to sustain it, but in its very existence, its most basic level of existence, that object needs us. For us to think about it, for us to pay attention to it, and then when we decide, it's gone. And what happens when we decide to turn our direction towards something else? Can we say there was really an object once upon a time? No, not really, because that object never really existed. And so, even this analogy is a little bit bad. It's a little bit off. Because ultimately there was a Lord, a God who created us and gave us this ability to think about and contemplate and imagine certain things in our mind. What is our relationship with God? Our relationship with God is one where if God creates us at one point, at any moment, at even less than a moment, God decides to turn his attention towards something else, we will be nothing. We will have disappeared off of existence, not just the face of this earth, but we would not be. So it's not just that God created us once upon a time and gives us food and drink and all of the other things that we might need, and then one day we will die. But we in our very being, most fundamental level of our existence, are in utter need of God. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So if we think about, we talked yesterday about what some in this society, in materialistic societies, understand as their selves. They say, for example, that this is who I am and there's no real difference that I can make in terms of, I don't want to change myself. I follow my own rules. If we ask, well, who are you? What is yourself? The answer has to be that yourself is something that is in utter need of something greater than you. And whatever greatness you might think about yourself, whatever great characteristic that you might think, this characteristic is also in utter need of something greater. And so whoever thinks about themselves in terms of something independent, then even the Quran says, قَدْ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَضَلَّ عَنْهُمْ مَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. Not only have they lost themselves, the Quran says, if you don't recognize your need, your utter and total need in God, then you have lost yourself. You don't know who you are. And in addition, all of those things that they have created and they have lied about creation, all of those are also going to be taken away from them. And so if we want to understand who we are, we have no other recourse but to understand that greatness in God, that's ultimate creation and that ultimate creator that we have. If we want to understand our world, these are where the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, really open up for us. When we try to contemplate on the beauty of Amir al-Mu'mineen's words, we see that it's not just when a person decides to turn their direction and turn their attention towards themselves, not only have they lost themselves and they've lost their truest sense of who they are, but they've also lost their world. Try to think about what is right and what is true in terms of either ourselves. Sometimes we think about it in terms of our society. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, in another khutbah, he says, لَبِئْسَ الْمَتْجَلُ أَنْ تَرَى الدُّنْيَا لِنَفْسِكَ ثَمَنًا. Not only are we thinking about who we are, but how we want to live our lives. We want to be true and just human beings in our society and call for justice. Well, if we want to truly call for justice, we want to be truly good, then we have to think about who we are and what we come from. And then in addition, we have to think about how we want to live our lives in terms of that ultimate goal that we have. And so Amir al-Mu'mineen says, if you dedicate yourself to this world, if you see yourself and identify yourself with this world, then not only have you lost yourself, but you have squandered all of those blessings that God has given you. The worst, how evil of a transaction, how evil of an account is a person to think of themselves or to think of the world as something that is worthy of them. Our ultimate goal, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. If we understand our relationship with God, then we can work towards that goal. We begin with Him and we end with Him. And so to think about our responsibility or to think about ourselves in terms of this world, then will be really a huge loss. Allah says, to illustrate this point, Mufassirun point to this ayah of the Quran. نَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. I'm closer to you than the closest thing that you can possibly imagine. You are in more need of me than your jugular vein, than the most basic necessity that you have. And so we have to recognize our need in God. And once we recognize this, then it makes total sense. We don't really even have to have this commandment that you shouldn't have any pride. If we are beings that are in total and utter need in a greater being, in Allah, then of course, what is there to take pride in? What is there to be arrogant about? Whatever I have in my life, my very existence is in need of God. And so what do I take pride in anymore? I have nothing, not just possessions, but my very being is nothing if it's separate from God. And it's in the recognition of this and how to present and articulate this, and then how to apply this to our lives that we look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. Let's turn our attention towards Karbala. You think about how much we must sacrifice in the path of Allah. What are the things that we can sacrifice? There was a moment in those final moments of the life of Imam Hussain when Imam Hussain was alone with Imam Hussain, and they were, as it is reported, Imam Hussain was speaking to his brother, and it is said that Imam Hussain was sad and he had this grief in his heart for losing the Imam. And Imam Hussain looks at Imam Hussain and he says to him, Ya Hussain, my tragedy is difficult, and even my parents' tragedy is difficult. But Ya Hussain, La yawmaka yawmaka ya Aba Abdullah. There is not going to be a day like yours, oh Aba Abdullah. When you think about how Imam Hussain recognized his utter need in Allah, in those final moments of the life of Imam Hussain, he turns to Allah and he says, Oh Allah, I am satisfied with whatever you place in my heart, because I know you are the source of any goodness and any blessing that I have. Think about that ultimate sacrifice that Imam Hussain gave. Those final moments of Karbala, there are many different moments that Imam Hussain had to sacrifice. When we think about the relationship of a brother to his brother, Imam Hussain had some of those remembrances and those memories of Imam Hussain in Karbala. It is said that at least 3 of the sons of Imam Hussain were killed on the day of Ashura. 3 of these memories of his brother were sent out into the field. Or in one place or another, they gave their lives for the cause of Imam Hussain. But there was one particular son of Imam Hussain that Imam Hussain looked out for. It is said that when Imam Hussain took the hand of Abdullah, he gave him to Lady Zainab. In the end of the day, this is one of the memories that he has, one of the final memories that he has of his brother. Imam Hussain paid special attention to Abdullah. Maybe it was because of that proximity that he had to him. And maybe it was because he knew what will come to Abdullah. And so he takes the hand of Abdullah and he places it in the hands of Lady Zainab. And he tells Lady Zainab to not let go of Abdullah. Don't let him move, don't let him come out into the battlefield. He is a young boy of 11, and maybe something will come into his heart to come and defend him. And so it is said that in those final moments, that final hour when there was no one left to protect Imam Hussain, all of the companions and even all of Banu Hashim, we think that the final tragedy and the final sacrifice that Imam Hussain gave was Ali ibn Asfar. But there was one sacrifice left. He had given Ali Akbar, he had given Abbas, and he had even placed that young infant child in his hands, and he had presented it to God, and he had received a response. And yet when those final moments came, when Imam Hussain had ridden out into battle, and he was on his horse, and the enemy soldiers were attacking him, there was one moment when Imam Hussain comes back. After all of that fighting, Imam Hussain comes back and he looks towards his camp. And then he turns back into the battlefield and he goes. And then all of a sudden, Imam Hussain gets struck and he begins to falter. And it is said that he comes off of his horse. And then Abdullah, he sees that his uncle is all alone and there is no one to protect him. And the body of Imam Hussain at that time was full of arrows and full of blows. And there's nothing left of the energy of Imam Hussain, and it is said that he falls to the ground. And so Abdullah, in this state, he lets go of the hand of Lady Zainab. He can't take it anymore. And he releases her hand and he runs into the battlefield, trying to protect his uncle. And it is said that as he gets closer to his uncle, and he comes and he stands in front of his uncle, and the enemy soldiers are coming closer and closer. He says, "Don't you dare touch my uncle. Don't you dare strike another blow." And it is said that one of the enemy soldiers raises his sword to come and strike the head of the Imam and to come and strike the body of the Imam, and Abdullah raises his small hands. You can imagine an 11-year-old boy, how thick and how strong his hands can be. And so he raises his hand, and this enemy soldier's sword comes and falls on his hand, and it cuts off his hand. The report goes that the hand doesn't get fully cut. It dangles by the skin. And as this young boy, he's standing there in grief and in wonder at what has happened, Imam Hussain holds him tight. He says, "Don't worry, my young nephew. Don't worry, this is a sacrifice that we have given. Don't worry, you will soon meet your father." The sacrifice was not over yet. It is said that Harmala had prepared his final arrow for the heart of Imam Hussain himself. He had struck 2 previous blows. One at the eye of Abbas, and another at that throat of the infant son. And the way the Maktal describes it, the way that it is reported, is that Harmala prepared his bow. Imam Hussain is holding this young child closely. It is said that in this state, Harmala releases his arrow and it strikes Abdullah at the neck and it slaughters Abdullah. How can one person take this much tragedy? This young boy dies in the hands of Imam Hussain. This is one final sacrifice that the Imam has to give. And Lady Zainab from afar is watching all of this happen. In patience, she says, Imam Hussain hears the cries of the ladies. Imam Hussain says, have patience. This is not the final sacrifice. Have patience, there is more to come. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ راجعون.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Shaheed Karbala Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Mazloom Karbala Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Gharib Benaba Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Asir Ashkiya Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Qatil Sarjuda Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Gharib Kam Sukhan Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Asir Khastatan Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Nabi ke jaan tan Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Shaheed Bekafan Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Mazloom Karbala Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Ali ka Dilruba Hussain,
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
घर से बुला के मेहमान
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
बिना यजीद ने आमा
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
घोड़े से गिर पड़े जोशा
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
सीने पे बैठा रूसिया
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
शाह से कहा ये मरते तक
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
उससे गला किया तलब
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
शहीद करबला हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
मजलूम करबला हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
गरीब बेनवा हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
असीर अश्किया हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
कतील सरजुदा हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
हुसैन हुसैन इमाम हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
हुसैन हुसैन इमाम हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
हुसैन हुसैन इमाम हुसैन
Hussain, Hussain, Imam Hussain,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein
Brothers, can I request you to form two lines, please? Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Tamam mala mein ajmatum, tamam mala mein ajmatum. Hussein bekas ka ho raha hai. अलमगरों में सजे हुए हैं, अलमगरों में सजे हुए हैं, दिलों में फर्शे अज़ा बिछा है। तमाम माला में अजमातम, हुसैन बेकर का हो रहा है। सियाह कपड़े, सियाह चादर, गमों की गर्दो गुब्बारे सर पर। सियाह कपड़े, सियाह चादर, गमों की गर्दो गुब्बारे सर पर। है सोगवारों के अश्क जारी, के सानी ये ज़हरा बेरिदा है। मैं अजमातम, मैं अजमातम। अलामा माशके सकीना देखो तो मोमिनो बस कहते रो। अलामा माशके सकीना देखो तो मोमिनो बस कहते रो। चचा भतीजी में क्या है निस्बत, वफाए आपास क्या वफा है। तमाम मालाम का हो रहा है। हुसैन पीरी में दिल संभाले कि दिल से उलझी सीना निकाले। हुसैन पीरी में दिल संभाले कि दिल से उलझी सीना निकाले। जवान बेचा लहू में डूबा, जमीन पे एड़ी रगड़ रहा है। मैं अजमातम, न मारे बरछी दिले नबी पर अभी हुए हैं जवान अकबर। न मारे बरछी दिले नबी पर अभी हुए हैं जवान अकबर। ये कत्ल जिसको तू कर रहा है, यही तो हम शक्ल मुस्तफा है। हुसैन बेकार मदीने वालों खामोश रहना, गरीब ज़ैनब से कुछ न कहना। मदीने वालों खामोश रहना, गरीब ज़ैनब से कुछ न कहना। बसा हुआ घर जो ले गई थी, वो करबला में उजड़ गया है। तमाम मालाम हुसैन बेन अलमगरों में सजे हुए हैं, अलमगरों में सजे हुए हैं, दिलों में फर्शे अज़ा बिछा है। मालाम में अजमातम, मालाम में अजमातम, हुसैन बेकर सा हो रहा है।
You take all the woman, so why did you leave me here and leave my heart broken? You leave me alone here, you leave me with my tears, and leave my heart broken, and leave my heart broken. I wake up to find you have left Oh Father, my tears drip down and they flow like a river. Please come back, I ask you by our Creator. I've never been away from you ever. I miss your scent and kiss the son of Hagar. And my name is the sweet name of your mother. Given me this name, and you I do not blame. Your mother, she loved you, and my love is the same. You've given me this name, and you I do not blame. Your mother, she loved you, and my love is the same. You take all the children, you take all the women. So why did you leave me here and leave my heart broken? You leave me alone here, you leave me with my tears, and leave my heart broken, and leave my heart broken. I'm surrounded by night, Father, you are my light. I live in a shadow, without hearing or sight. I'm surrounded by night, Father, you are my light. I live in a shadow, without hearing or sight. Take all the children, you take all the women. So why did you leave me here and leave my heart broken? You leave me alone here, you leave me with my tears, and leave my heart broken, and leave my heart broken. I long to hold you near, you leave me with my tears, and leave my heart broken, and leave my heart broken. He tells me, oh young one, it's God's decision that you must be left here and live like an orphan. He tells me, oh young one, it's God's decision that you must be left here and live like an orphan. I tell him I can't bear you leave me with my tears and leave my heart broken, and leave my heart broken. You take all the children, you take all the women. So why did you leave me here and leave my heart broken? You leave me alone here, you leave me with my tears, and leave my heart broken, and leave my heart broken. Ya Hussein.
Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.
दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा ए दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा ए दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा बिन्ते अली ये बच्चों से कहती थी बार बार बिन्ते अली ये बच्चों से कहती थी बार बार रंगों से दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा जाफर का इफ्तिखार हाथ में शेर हो मैदान जाओ फतेह में अब कुछ न देर हो ऐ दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा ऐ दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा हर बात अपनी सुन से सिवा हो तो बात है हर बात अपनी सुन से सिवा हो तो बात है वो तन पड़े के हंसी तो बात है ऐसी बयान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा ऐसी बयान जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा रहे से मगर मुँह न मोड़ना रहे से मगर मुँह न मोड़ना है कर की याद छोड़ना है दिल बराने जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा है दिल बराने जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा शिल्पो उमर के सर जो तारो तो खुश हूँ मैं शिल्पो उमर के सर जो तारो तो खुश हूँ मैं दुश्मन जो झूम झूम के मारो खुश हूँ मैं है दिल बराने जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा है दिल बराने जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा बच्चों ज़ईफ़ नाम को ज़ल्लत न दीजियो बच्चों ज़ईफ़ नाम को ज़ल्लत न दीजियो लाशें उतार भाई न दीजियो ऐ दिल बराने जाफर तैयार अलविदा अलविदा अलविदा ऐ दिल बराने जाफर तैयार
अलविदा अलविदा Hussain, Hussain, Hussain, Hussain, Hussain, Hussain, Hussain, Hussain, Hussain,
شبا شبا به سوگ باری هوا هوا بیقراری شبا شبا به سوگ باری خدا رو شکر هنوز مربا هوای نوکرات داری هوای نوکرات داری هوا هوای بیقراری شبا شبا به سوگ باری خدا رو شکر هنوزم مربا هوای نوکرات داری هوای نوکرات داری هرچند سیاه دروغم بر دلم رو برده هرچند سیاه دروغم بر دلم رو برده مادرت برامون پیرهن سیاه برده مادرت برامون پیرهن سیاه برده السلام علی ساکن کربلا السلام علی ساکن کربلا يا ابن خير النساء يا ابن خير المنى يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین هوا که بیقراری شب و سوگواری هوا که بیقراری خدا رو شد که موزه برباد هوای نوکراتو داری هوای نوکراتو داری پرچم سیاهه تو گنبد دلم رو برده پرچم سیاهه تو گنبد دلم رو برده مادرت برامون پیرهن سیاه برده السلام علی ساکن کربلا السلام علی ساکن کربلا یا ابن خیر النساء یا ابن خیر الورا یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین خدا رو شکر کلم به گوشت خدا رو شکر کلم به گوشت لباس مشکی تو میپوشد لباس مشکی تو میپوشد ایشالله که یه تار موتو به عالمین میفروشم به عالمین میفروشم خدا رو شد قلم به دوشد لباس مشکی تو میپوشد ایشالله که یه تار موتو به عالمین میفروشم به عالمین میفروشم با تو زنده هستم کاشکی با تو من بمیرم با تو زنده هستم کاشکی با تو من بمیرم سینه زن بمونم آقا سینه زن بمیرم نام تو دم کن را که بر یا حسین مهر تو رحمت و واسم یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین منو این همه غم هر باب ببرم هر باب ببرم هر باب منو این همه غم هر باب ببرم هر باب ببرم نفس نفس من شعر غم تو نفس نفس من شعر غم تو ایشالله بمیرم تو قلم تو حسین سار الله حسین سار الله ابا عبدالله حسین سار الله ابا عبدالله حسین سار الله ابا عبدالله حسین سار الله ابا عبدالله نوکری آبرو ارباب کربلا آرزو ارباب کربلا آبروم ارباب نکنید آبروم ارباب کربلا آرزوم ارباب کربلا آرزوم ارباب تا کن آقا که تا خدایی بشن تا کن آقا تا که خدایی بشن شبیه شمدا کربلایی بشن حسین سال الله حسین سال الله ابا عبدالله حسین سال الله ابا عبدالله حسین سال الله ابا عبدالله حسین سال الله ابا حسین سال الله حسین سال الله ابا عبدالله حسین سال الله ابا مظلوم شهید عطشان اولا بیکس تلوان یا بیعبدالله یا بیعبدالله یا ابن الزهراء یا ابن الطاهر يا ابن الهيدر يا ابن الحيدر كم تنهار درد الأرض فيك سكن بك خون البدن دون الوتر يا ابن الله ضرب شوقا يرسل حول زبور كربلا دلم ترسم ببارد آرزوی کربلا تشنه آب فراتم بیاید مالت بده تا بگیرم در بغل قبر شهید کربلا حسین جانم حسین جانم حسین جانم حسین جانم Ya Hasan o ya Hüseyin, ya Hasan o ya Hüseyin, ya Hasan o ya Hüseyin, ya Hasan o ya Hüseyin, ya Hasan o ya Hüseyin, ya Hasan o ya Hüseyin, İlahi bab el-far, İlahi bab el-far, İlahi bab el-far, İlahi bab el-far. إلهي باب الفار إلهي باب الفار إلهي برقية إلهي برقية إلهي بسكينة إلهي بسكينة يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زينب يا زهراء يا زهراء يا زهراء يا زهراء يا زهراء يا زهراء يا زهراء هنا أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين أمير المؤمنين شهد كتبنا الحسن أجل على ظهوره السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة شب یتیم آقا امام حسن دیدم به چشم فاطمی خود عمو حسین زهرا کنار مقتل تو ایستاده است عمو جان دستم شکست ناله زدم فاطمه مدام عباس مرتضی به من این یاد داده آی زهرا اگر کسی نشکست براش عبدالله به راه تو سینه گشاده همین که دست عبدالله جدا شد فریاد زد و آخه یه جا میون کوچه فاطمه سلام الله علیها دست در لباس امیرالمؤمنین خواست نداره علی را به مسجد ببرم اما ناجی با غلاف شمشیر به دست فاطمه آی باسمك الإمام العز الجل الإكرام آقا عبد الله الحسين وبيتيم آقا إمام حسن عبد الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مغلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك وعلى محبة الحسين في الدنيا والآخرة واكفنا يا قاضي الحاجات ويا كافي المهمة إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك غافر الذنب والخطيئة إنك على كل شيء قدير. For all those who are sick, especially those who are suffering from COVID-19, especially the muhabbin of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, raise your hands. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أما يجيب المضطر ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر ويكشف السوء. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع السلام.